Good afternoon, class. We are looking at the first module covering chapters 1 and 2. Here's chapter 1, functions, chapter 2, linear functions. And we're going to go with the first part, chapter 1, functions, 2.5 complex numbers, 2.6 quadratic functions. And we're going to cover the first part. Chapter 1, functions. Number 1, answer the following. Find the distance between the 2 points. The coordinates are -5 and -6, and 4 and 2. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of the line segment that joins the 2 given points. So what is a distance formula? The distance between 2 points using Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So this distance squared plus this distance squared is this distance squared, which results in the following. This distance is x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared. This is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared, and this is distance squared. In other words, you can call this a, b, c. So from a squared plus b squared equals c squared, it results in the distance formula. So there's a reason for it. I wanted to explain that one too. So basically, plug in. And remember, these are the 2 points. And it doesn't matter which one you take as the first, which one you take as the second point, because when you square a number, whether it's positive or negative, it becomes positive. So from here, you can say 4 minus -5, which makes it 4 plus 5, quantity squared. And then 2 minus -6 or plus 6, quantity squared. So we are following the formula. 4 and 5, 9 squared is 81. 2 and 6, 8 squared is 64. And they add up to 145. Now, this is an exact answer, everybody. This is an exact answer. This is an approximation. If they don't ask for an approximation, you always go with an exact answer. And as far as the approximation, normally they would ask you how many decimals. Part B is asking for the midpoint. So this is the distance formula. So if you have 2 points, then the midpoint, you add up the x coordinates divided by 2, x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2, and y sub 1 plus y sub 2, the y coordinates divided by 2 to get to the coordinates for the midpoint. Justification for that, if you draw a couple of line segments parallel to the x and y axis. So this is parallel to the x, this is parallel to the y, and from the midpoint, if you drop a perpendicular, it creates a small triangle and a large one. So the small one and the large one, okay, are similar. Triangle ABC, the big one, and the CDE, this is the symbol for triangle, are similar. Similar figures mean corresponding angles are equal. As you can see, this is a common between the two. This is a 90-degree angle, this is a 90-degree angle, and of course, these two are equal. And because all angles are equal, they're considered similar. As a result, the corresponding sides are in proportion. That's the definition of a similar. Therefore, we can write CD from the smaller one over BC from the larger one is the same as CE from the smaller one to AC, the bigger triangle. Now, because we are interested in the midpoint, D is chosen to be between the 2 points C and B. Because these by choice between the two, this distance and this distance, that means CD and BD are identical. So if these two are identical, the ratio of CD to BC is 1 to 2. Cross product, AC becomes 2CE. AC becomes 2CE. And therefore AE becomes equal to EC. Therefore, the coordinates of D are x equals the midpoint of AC, the average of the x coordinates of A and C, and Y, the midpoint of AB would be the average of Y coordinate of A and B. So in essence, this is the proof. But to answer part B, all you have to do is just plug in, meaning add up the x coordinates -5 and 4 divided by 2, add up the y coordinates 6 and 2 divided by 2. So this to add up to 1, so -1/2. These two add up to -4 divided by 2, or -2. So in short, the answers for parts A and B are what you see here. A quick recap. You use this formula to find the distance between these 2 points. You use this formula. That means you add up the x and y coordinates divided by 2 to find the midpoint. A man drove 10 miles directly east from his home, made a left turn at an intersection, and then traveled 5 miles north to his place of work. If a road was made directly from his home to his place of work, what would its distance be to the nearest tent? So here's the home, somewhere here. And we're going to go 10 miles to the right, east, and then up 5 miles north. So it looks like this. This distance is 10 miles. This distance is 5 miles. What are we looking for? We are looking for this distance. What if we could go directly from this point to this point? That uses Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's say this is a, this is b. And so 10 squared plus 5 squared equals c squared. This would be 100 plus 25. So c is the square root of 125. If you use a calculator, I use a bunch of decimals just to show you both. You have to be careful when you do that to see what they want you to do. Okay. And so it's about 11.1803 4 miles. This distance. If so, how much shorter would the man's one-way trip to be every day? So what if we didn't have to go this way and we had to go this way? Obviously, we have to go this way, which is 10 plus 5 miles. So we have to go 15 miles. If we didn't, we would go this much. So 10 plus 5 minus square root of 125. Again, I'm using square root of 125 to emphasize the importance of an exact answer. And we end up with roughly 3.8 miles. So if you subtract 11.2, you get about 3.8 miles. That's if we could go straight. Solve 5 over x plus 1 over x minus 3 equals negative 6 over x squared minus 2x minus 3. So we are looking at a rational equation we want to solve. And the best course of action is to multiply both sides by LCD. And to do so, we are going to factor every denominator. This can't be factored. This can't be factored, but this one can be factored. You want two numbers. The product is negative 3. The sum is negative 2. Positive 1 and negative 3. So we factor the last denominator. If we multiply both sides by LCD happened to be, for all of these three fractions, happen to be the denominator of the last one, we can come up with the answer. However, before that, we want to make sure we exclude the answers that can't be. So from here, you set x plus 1 equal to 0, and you say x can't be negative 1. This one, x can't be positive 3. They give you the same answer. So you have to exclude what makes any of the denominator 0. So these two numbers can't be. Meaning, at the end, for any reason, if you have, let's say, a bunch of solutions and one of them is those, you exclude that because it's an extraneous solution. So what you do, you multiply both sides of this by x plus 1 times x minus 3. So if you multiply this one by the first one, x plus 1 cancels out, you get 5 times x minus 3. And you multiply it by the second one, x minus 3 cancels out, plus 1 times x plus 1. The right side, everything cancels out. You just have the numerator, namely negative 6. This is the fastest and easiest way to solve something like this, a rational equation. So we have 5x minus 15, we're going to distribute, plus x plus 1, and the right side doesn't change. Is to add up to 6x, is to add up to negative 14. So we have 6x minus 14 is minus 6. Move that, make it positive 14. And these two add up to 8. Divide both sides by 6. We get 8 over 6 or 4/3. We're going to move on. Let me know if you have any questions. Lines, slopes, interpretation of slopes. Slope is defined as rise over run. Rise, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub. Another notation is delta y over delta x. This is red delta, which refers to change, rise over run. And so this is the formula for this slope. Which is the average rate of change of y with respect to x. This is how you define it. Slope is the average rate of change of y with respect to x. As we look at these lines, so this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. This is a horizontal line, the slope is 0. Vertical line, the slope is undefined. This line has a positive slope. This line has a negative slope. HL, short for horizontal line, has the equation y equals a constant b. The slope is 0. The y-intercept is 0b. So here. So for example, in this case, would be 3. 0, 3. VL, short for vertical line, has the equation x equals a. Slope is undefined. X-intercept at A0. So here's the x-intercept. So again, this was the y-intercept for the horizontal line. Here's the x-intercept for this vertical line. And because this point has coordinates 2, 3, then this must be 2, comma, 0. Standard form of a line is ax plus by equals c. That means x and y are on the same side. Slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Point slope form of a line, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Two lines are considered parallel if they have equal slopes, m1 equals m2, and different y-intercepts, b1 is not equal to b2. Two lines are considered perpendicular if their slopes are negative reciprocal of each other, or their product, the product of the slopes, is -1. So what you're looking at, this is the synopsis of everything we need to know about lines. All right, we are looking at parts A and B. Part A, x equals -2. Graph the line on a rectangular coordinate system and show the intercept. Well, if x is -2, it's a vertical line, and then the x-intercept is located at -2, comma 0, and that's the line. If we are dealing with y equals 3, which is a horizontal line, then the y-intercept must be 0, 3. So 1, 2, 3 here. And then the line is a horizontal line. So that's the point, or the y-intercept, and this is the line. Find the equation of a line containing 4, 0 and 4, 5. You really don't have to go through the process. You notice both of them have the same x coordinate. Therefore, it must be a vertical line with the equation x equals 4. Find the equation of a line containing 1, -7 and 3, -7. In this case, both points have the same y coordinate, so it must be y equals -7. It's a horizontal line, everybody. So it's pretty straightforward. Find the equation of a line in slope-intercept form that passes through the point -3, 10 and 5, -6, 5. Find the intercepts and graph. Reminding you of the information that was given about various types of lines, the slope, and so on first here. So to do so, first and foremost, we're going to find the slope. So we are going to use this formula. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So -6 minus 10 over 5 minus -3. That is the slope, M. These two add up to -16. 5 plus 3 becomes 8, and the answer is -2. We have the slope and we have 2 points. We want to find the equation of a line, and we are going to use the point slope. And we are going to use one of those pairs, and it makes no difference which one. In fact, I'm going to show you both. So we are going to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. If we use the first pair, y minus 10 equals m, which is -2, x minus -3, which makes it x plus 3. If I were to use this one, just want to quickly show you. If I were to use this one, I would get y minus -6 equals m -2 times x minus 5. And if you simplify, both of them give you the same answer. So we are going to simplify this one. We are going to add 10 to both sides. And now this is the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Now, of course, I've shown you this one, and I'm not going to finish it, but I want to make a point, and the point is, you should check your book. How do you check it? Well, this point was used to come up with the equation of a line y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form, right? Plug in the second one, see if it's a true statement. If not, there must be a mistake somewhere. So if I plug in 5 minus 2 times 5 minus 10 plus 4 is -6, yes, that's a correct process. We haven't made a mistake. Now, I can always put the original points and that works, okay? But I like to get the intercepts. Obviously, this one is 0, 4, the y-intercept. The x-intercept, you set the y equal to 0. And clearly, x becomes 2. So you have the two pairs, 2, 0, 0, 4. And you can use the original pairs. This gives you a better and more precise location. So negative 3, 10, 5 minus 6. Again, I like to add intercepts. Find the equation of a line that is perpendicular to 3y equals x minus 4 and passes through the point negative 2, 1. Find the intercepts and graph. So the given line, we need to find its slope. That means we have to put it in slope-intercept format. You have to put it in this format. You are going to divide both sides by 3. Y equals 1/3 x minus 4/3, and clearly this is your slope. And we call it m sub 1, not m, because we are interested in a second line which is perpendicular to this. If it was parallel, we would use the same slope. Because it's perpendicular, m2 equals negative 1 over m1. In other words, the reciprocal of this and negate that. The reciprocal is 3 over 1, negate that, make it minus 3. So the negative reciprocal. And now we are going to use the point slope again. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. We have the slope and we have the pair. So y minus 1 equals negative 3, x minus negative 2, which makes it plus 2. So we are using this pair and this slope, and we get minus 3x minus 6. Remove the negative 1. And we have y equals minus 3x minus. Since you don't have a second point, you really don't have much to go by, but you can plug in the given point and it should work. That shows in the process here, you didn't make a mistake, okay? Now, let's actually graph both lines, and for both lines, I want to come up with the intercept. So for this one, if you set x equal to 0, you find y. If you find y equal to 0, you find x. So if I set x equal to 0, I get negative 4/3. I want you to see that. If I set y equal to 0, x becomes 4. So I hope you can see that. So quickly, if I set, let's say, y equals 0, I get 3 times 0 is 0, x minus 4, and x becomes 4. And the other one is even easier. You set x equal to 0. You set x equal to 0, 3y equals negative 4, 0, negative 4. So Those are the points. And so we can plot those pairs. 0, negative 4/3 is negative 1 and 1/3, so somewhere here. And 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the line. This is the given line. The one perpendicular to that is this one. And obviously, 0, negative 5 is the y-intercept. And if I want the x-intercept, I set y equal to 0. And to solve this, you move the negative 5 becomes positive, divide by negative 3, you get minus 5/3. In other words, this one, you say positive 5 is negative 3x. X becomes negative 5/3, and that's what we have here. So plot those two pairs. 0, negative 5. Negative 5/3, that means negative 1 and 2/3. Connect them. And of course, negative 2, 1 is also on that. Again, when you use the intercepts, it makes the graph look better, okay? Again, let me know if you have any questions. Minus 2, comma 1. You are going to move on, making sure everybody's in good shape. All right. A retired woman has $50,000 to invest, but needs to make $6,000 a year from the interest to meet certain living expenses. One bond investment pays 15% annual interest. The rest of it, she wants to put in a CD that pays 7%. By the way, before we move on, one might say, why don't we put all of it at 15%? There are different reasoning, including tax purposes. If we let X be the amount the woman invests in the 15% bond, how much will she be able to invest in the CD? Set up and solve the equation for how much the woman should invest in each option to sustain a $6,000 annual return. So you should always make up a table and understand in this case, case number 1 is at 15%, case number 2 is at 7%. And we are going to go with the interest formula that everybody should know, I equals PRT. And let X be the amount that we're going to put in a 15%. So put the X here. What about 50,000? That's the total amount that is at hand. And how much interest do we need? $6,000. So we put in the amount of interest is in the last column. So how much at the 15%? We don't know. X amount. How much is the total? We know, 50,000. How much total interest are we interested in getting? We know $6,000. So we are going to fill up the rest of the table. If we have a total of $50,000 and X amount is spent here, the rest of it must be here. So 50,000 minus X. And by the way, to make sure you don't make a mistake, if you add these two, X and minus X cancel each other, we get 50,000. If the first one pays 15%, I equals a P, the amount of principal, R is the rate, 0.15, T time, and in this case, it's 1 year because annual interest rate. So you take T to be 1. Therefore, the product of these two, 0.15 times X times 1, we don't write the 1, okay, 1 year. The T is 1. For this case, would be 0.07 times this, 50,000 minus X times 1. Again, we don't write times 1. And they're supposed to add up to give $6,000. So just add them up. So the table will help us make up the equation, and practically we are ready to move on. This is the hardest part, coming up with this equation. Now, coming up with the table, knowing the formula for the simple interest, that's what makes it nice and easy. And now we are going to distribute. First, I want to explain how you do this. You should know that, but in case, when you multiply decimals with a number that has a bunch of zeros, you ignore the decimals, you ignore the zeros. 7 times 5 is 35. This has 2 decimals, this has 4 zeros. So you subtract the number of decimals from zeros or vice versa. The one which is more of, you need that. You need 2 zeros because zeros, we have 2 decimals, everybody, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. Zeros, we have more by how many? By 2. So 7 times 5 is 35. We put 2 zeros. So the product is 7 times 5, 35, and then we add 2 zeros, okay? This is minus 0.07x. We put these two together. We get 0.08x. We subtract 3,500 from 6,000. We get 2,500. We divide both sides by 0.08. By the way, normally we shouldn't have a decimal in the denominator, so you add 2 zeros to the top and you make the bottom 8. In other words, this is 250,000. Okay, oh, there's not enough room. Let me erase that and just write it here. $2,500. You add 2 zeros and you make the denominator 8. And it ends up being $31,250. So the X amount is $31,250. The rest of it, that means 50,000 minus this number, which is $18,750, invested at 7%. Pretty straightforward, everybody. So a quick recap. We have this much. So we are going to go with the investment at 15% and 7%. The amount at each one, and the interest uses the formula I equals PRT. The amount, we know the total is 50,000. and the interest, the total we need is $6,000. If X amount goes for the 15%, the rest of the 50,000, which is 50,000 minus X at 7%, I equals PRT, and T is 1 because it's an annual interest. So 0.15 times X times 1, this one, 0.07 times 50,000 minus X times 1, they should add up to 6,000, and the rest is history. Flora starts riding her bike at 20 miles per hour. After a while, she slows down to 12 miles per hour and maintains that speed for the rest of the trip. The whole trip of 70 miles takes her 4.5 hours. For what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour? This is a class of problem known as motion problem, everybody. In the case of a motion problem, D equals R times T. Rate, the average speed, times T gives us the total distance. So we make up a table. Rate times time is distance. To start with, the rate or speed is 20 miles per hour. After a while, 12 miles per hour. The whole trip of 70 miles distance, the total goes here. Takes 4.5 hours. Time takes total of 4.5 hours. So I hope you see what is given where you put it. So how long did she go for 20 miles per hour? I don't know, X, Y, Z, T. Let's go with T to represent time. If the total time was 4.5, the rest of it must be for 12 miles per hour, which means 4.5 minus T. Please understand, again, if you add these two cancel each other, we get 4.5. What distance do we cover here? 20 times T, because D equals RT. What about here? 12 times 4.5 minus T. If the total distance is 70 miles, the sum of these two must be 70 miles. So 20T plus 12 times 4.5 minus T must be 70. So we went over the whole thing, set the table up to be able to come up with this equation. The rest is very simple. So we are going to write 20T, 12 times 4.5, 54, because 12 times 4 is 48, and half of 12 is 6. They add up to 54 minus 12T. And now These two add up to 8t. Move the 54 and subtract it from 70. You get 16. Divide by 8. The t is 2 hours, which means the time is 2 hours here, and the rest of it, 4.5 minus that, 2.5 hours is here. And before we move on, we need to check to see if we have answered the question. For what distance did she travel 20 miles per hour? We haven't answered that. That would be 20t, this distance. So 20 times 2, 40 miles for 40 miles. She traveled at 20 miles per hour. A quick recap. This is a class of problem known as motion problem. By motion problem, we mean this formula, D equals RT. So distance is rate times time. You fill up the table with rate, time, and distance accordingly. You put the numbers where they belong as they are given. And then you can create an equation to solve for a missing variable. First, solve the formula for W. P equals 2L plus 2W. I hope you recognize this as the perimeter of a rectangle. Then use your result to find the width, W, of a rectangle whose length is 15 and whose perimeter is 58. So P equals 2L plus 2W. First, let's do this drawing. This is the width, this is the length, this is a rectangular shape. So since we are solving for W, we write this and we move the 2L. We move the 2L to the left. That means we subtract it. The next thing is to divide both sides by 2. And this is the width. Now, one thing I want to add before we move on to the next part. It's important to know that you cannot simply drop these two. That's wrong. What you can do is that you can say P over 2 minus 2L over 2, which becomes P over 2 minus L. That you can do. Okay, don't mix them up. In any event, let's plug in. Now, for the second part, the P is 58 and the L is 15. Two times 15 is 30. Subtracted from 58, you get 28 divided by 2. The width becomes 14. And as always, you really should check your work. And an easy way to check it out, 14 plus 15, the length is 29 times 2 must be 58, and it is, because as far as this formula class, you can also say 2 times L plus W, right? So a quick recap, a rectangular shape, the width and the length. The perimeter is 2 times L plus W or 2L plus 2W. They want us to solve for W, so we are going to move the 2L and then divide by 2. We plug in and we come up with the answer. Perform the indicated operation and express the result as a simplified complex number, a minus 1 plus 2i times minus 2 plus 3i. Well, I'd like to remind you of what we have learned before about complex numbers. Complex numbers are in the form of a plus bi. I, by definition, is square root of negative 1. Square root of negative n is I square root of n. A plus bi times a minus bi is a squared plus b squared. I want to explain that, as hopefully everybody remembers that a plus b times a minus b is a squared minus b squared. So this is a squared minus b squared I squared, and I squared is negative 1. I squared is negative 1. This is I, this is I squared. All right. Now, you want to multiply, just do the this distributive property. So first you multiply by negative 1, and then 2i as follows. So minus times minus positive 2 minus 3i minus 4i plus 6i squared. So imagine it's x, and do the FOILing. Then we are going to change this. So I'm going to remind you, I is the square root of negative 1. I squared is negative 1. If you cube it, you get negative I, and to the power of 4 is 1. I want to make sure that, let me just erase my board. This one is clear. I cubed, everybody, is I squared times I. So since I squared is negative 1, makes it minus I. And I to the power of 4, you can say I squared to the second power, or negative 1 to the second power, which makes it positive. And this is very important. Later on, I'll show you in a moment how we use that to simplify powers of I. And so if that is the case, the first thing is we change the I squared to negative 1. So this becomes minus 6. You can add these two numbers to get to negative 4, and these two to get to negative 7i. All right. Three plus 4i over 2 minus I. How do we divide complex numbers? If they say simplify or divide or put it in standard form, makes no difference. The complex number has the standard form a plus bi, they mean put it in that form, okay? The process is to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. Remember, the conjugate of a plus bi is a minus bi and so forth. So the conjugate of 2 minus I is 2 plus I. So we're going to multiply and divide by. For the denominator, we use this a squared plus b squared, so 2 squared plus 1 squared. For the numerator, we do the FOILing. So what happens? 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times I, 3i, 8i, 4i squared. As I mentioned, the bottom is 2 squared plus 1 squared. Again, we're going to replace the I squared with negative 1. This becomes minus 4. We can add these two to get to positive 2. 3 and 8, 11i. 4 and 1 is 5. Let me erase my work so you can easily see what happens. Now, if you left it as that, it's fine. However, we want to make sure that you can recognize this as 2 over 5 plus 11 over 5 times I, because if somebody says, okay, put it in a standard form and tell us what is A, what is B, A is 2 over 5. B is 11 over 5, okay? Including the sign, it happened to be plus. If it's negative, so be it. Okay. Square root of negative 9 plus 3 times square root of negative 16. 9 comes out as 3. The negative sign, we write it under the radical. In other words, square root of negative 1 as I. So this must be 3i, and this must be 4i. I'm following this format. And so this is 12i. They add up to 15i. I to the power of negative 6. It's the same as 1 over I to the power of 6 according to the negative exponential rules, as you remember. Just a quick reminder. A to the power minus m is 1 over a to the power of m. And so, how do you deal with that? I want you to pay attention to the fact that I to the power of 4 is 1. When you have powers of I, there are different approaches. The fastest and easiest ways to remember I to the power of 4 is 1. Therefore, the methodology is to divide the exponent, in this case 6, by 4, and you get the answer, which is 1 with the remainder 2. You are concerned with the remainder and the remainder only. So it will become 1 over I squared. And you know I squared is negative 1. The answer is negative 1. I'm going to explain this further by looking at a couple more examples of that, okay? As far as this is concerned and paying attention to I to the power of 4. So, powers of I, because I to the power of 4 is 1. Anything that is divisible by 4, for example, I to the power of 8 is 1. I to the power of 80 is 1. I to the power of 100 is 1. Because all of these exponents are divisible by 4. Because that's the case, all you have to do, divide the number by 4 and keep the remainder. For example, what is I to the power of 1225? You are going to divide 1225 by 4. And it doesn't matter what the answer is. What matters is that what the remainder is. And as you may recall, division by 4, the test of divisibility, a number is divisible by 4 if the last two digits, we read 25 is divisible by 4. 25 is not, but if you divide it by 4, you get 6 with the remainder 1. And because that's the case, the answer to this one is I to the power of 1, or simply I. Okay. What about I to the power of 43? I want to show you this one also. Exponent is 43, everybody. Divide by 4, and again, it doesn't matter what the quotient is. And I hope you realize the remainder is 3 because 40 is divisible by 4. The remainder is 3. Therefore, I to the power of 43 is the same as I cubed. And you should know it's minus I. So a quick recap. Complex numbers are in the form of a plus bi. Square root of -1 is I. Therefore, square root of minus n is I square root of n. Because a plus b times a minus b is a squared minus b squared. A plus bi times a minus bi becomes a squared plus b squared. We need to know powers of I. I squared is -1. I cubed is -I. I to the power of 4 is 1. That helps us with simplification. When we have division like this, we multiply and divide by the conjugate of the denominator. When we have a number in this format, you have to change this to I, a complex format, a proper format before you move on. If you have powers of I, you divide by 4 and you keep the remainder. As an example, I to the power of 43 becomes I cubed, which is -I. I to the power of 1225. The remainder is 1, becomes I to the power of 1, or simply I.